travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime, and Fuego, and if you please should join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right, so very stoked to have you here. Bienvenidos and welcome. You can just call me Fuego for short. And this is a special bit of palaver here because it has been like a King crazy last week or so. I knew that was going to be the case throughout September, October, and into November. I knew the next few months were just going to be nuts with the release of It Chapter 2, King's new book, The Institute. We've also got the premiere of Creepshow, the premiere of Mr. Mercedes Season 3, the premiere on Netflix October 4th of In the Tall Grass. We also still have Dr. Sleep coming. I mean, there's just, man, what a bonkers, amazing time, what a resurgence, and what an amazing instance to be a King fan, enthusiast, as I like to consider myself, not an expert, as I was just talking about before I began filming this. But another big bit of information that we got this past Tuesday when King was on The View, which is a lady-friendly talk show of sorts that I remember when Barbara Walters, I want to say, did it at one point in time. She was 2020, right? Maybe? Anyway, long story short, King made an appearance on that show to promote It Chapter 2, to promote The Institute, his new book, but also to break some big casting news about the CBS All Access new version, 10 episodes that Josh Boone is behind, along with, you know, even King's son Owen, which is interesting, who was helping out with some stuff in the writing room of The Stand. I was waiting to do this video until one very specific cast member was named, and it ended up being two very specific cast members named, and now it's finally time to talk about this. I was initially underwhelmed when I heard about some of the casting. I was just like, okay, James Marsden as Stu Redman, I'm okay with that casting. It feels very vanilla casting, and yeah, he's a gringo, so you know, that's understandable, but I mean, it's like Stu Redman, very much as I have talked previously on this show when referencing The Stand and doing some anniversary coverage on both the television series and you know, the comic and the original book and all that other stuff. Lots of anniversary coverage. I did a Stand panel recently for the artist formerly known as Phoenix Comic-Con that turned to Phoenix Fan Fest Fusion or whatever. I don't know. It's had so many different names and incarnations at this particular point after being Phoenix Comic-Con for so long, but I was okay with that casting, you know? I mean, Stu Redman is very much like Scott Summers in a lot of ways, or at least the way that he was portrayed in those X-Men feature films. He's the everyman, you know? He is the fearless leader, but he's just kind of safe and a little boring to a degree, and that's just, I don't know. I've always felt that way about Stu Redman. Gary Sinise gave a little bit more charm to the character, I think, in the original miniseries. And that is one thing that I will contend, is I still love the original miniseries, and I think, especially in contrast with, you know, I was talking about this on the Stephen King podcast with Lou just recently when he invited me on for episode 102, which all of you, please go seek it out. I have links in my various, you know, bits of social media here and there, but yeah, when him and I were talking about miniseries of King, when we were in that golden age of all that stuff in like the 90s specifically, really, pretty much carried through the predominance of that decade, there's stuff that has aged okay, you know. I would say the original 8 miniseries has aged okay. Then there's stuff that has not aged quite as gracefully. I'm looking at you, the Tommyknockers and the Langoliers, and some may even contend King's own scripting of The Shining. I disagree with that. I actually really enjoy that version. It's not as visually striking as the Kubrick and, you know, feature film that has so much notoriety, but I feel like the spirit and the tone was more just accurately reflective of the source material. But then there's stuff that I think has aged really well, and there's not many that I think can contend with The Stand as far as an incredible cast, but I mean pretty much an all-star cast at that particular point. I mean, big-time movie stars, you know, like Molly Ringwald and Gary Sinise and stuff. Now granted, Sinise's, you know, his fame was going up because it was right around the time that he did Forrest Gump, and, you know, unfortunately, Ringwald was a lot further removed from all of her John Hughes films, you know, from the 80s, but nonetheless, I mean, between the two of them and lots of TV actors, and so this new casting is a similar, just kind of hodgepodge of sorts of, you know, both television and film actors, but I still contend that that original series has aged much better than a lot of other King stuff. And so, I mean, yeah, James Marsden, you know, he was fine as Cyclops in those X-Men movies. I personally, I mean, the movie that I always think of him as, and yes, just Enchanted is a guilty pleasure, but yeah, Disturbing Behavior, man, that's a great movie with Katie Holmes, Lord of Mercy, back in the Dawson's Creek days and stuff. And so I feel like, you know, that Nick Stahl, that's an underrated late 90s, just kind of, I mean, that and The Faculty and Idle Hands were three that I just really especially liked, that had that whole, like, you know, high school type flair. Then Final Destination, that's another great one. But so Marsden, I was like, okay, I'm fine with him being Stu Redman, but then again, he just kind of embodies that Stewishness to me in a lot of ways. And then another one of the early casting announcements was Psycho herself, Amber Heard, and yeah, I am Team Depp in that particular you know, battle between the two of them. It's pretty long documented about her wackiness, and I just don't personally think she's a very good actress, you know. But once again, this casting, since I don't like her as an actress, and since Nadine is somebody you are not supposed to like in the book and in the various adaptations, and the girl from Just Shoot Me, I had maybe a little bit more vulnerability than I think was necessary. But I mean, Amber Heard, since all the boys love Mandy Lane, and then she was in a few other things, like, you know, the Rum Diaries, where she met her future ex-husband, and various otherness. So yeah, honestly, both her and Johnny Depp are flippin' psychos, and so you're just, I don't know, I guess maybe in that regard, she fits the Nadine character to a degree. So that's casting that I felt was a little bit more on point and on the nose. But then again, once again, Marsden is pretty on the nose casting for, you know, for Stu. But if you want to talk about super on the nose casting, Whoopi Goldberg as Mother Abigail. I know she was approached initially way back in '94 when they were putting the original miniseries together, and due to lack of interest, scheduling conflicts, there's different things out, and that was one of the reasons why King actually was on The View to make mention of the fact, and she even apologized on that show to King for turning down the role previously, and how stoked she was to be finally doing it. I thought the original actress, you know, who was much younger than Whoopi is now, who played the role under lots of makeup, did a tremendous job as the original Mother Abigail. And this is at least where, yes, Whoopi is a great actress. You know, I mean, what wasn't The Color Purple? God damn it! That was Oprah Winfrey. I'm terrible. I appreciate her more so for her comedic work. You know, I mean, she was great as Guinan on TNG, but, you know, I think of, like, you know, like Burglar and, you know, Sister Act and things of that nature. Nonetheless, I think she'll do a great job. She hasn't really been acting in dramatic work as often lately, but I'm very curious to see what she brings to the role. And I mean, yeah, you know, Mother Abigail is one of my most revered characters in all of King's work, especially for the sheer fact that she is the light balance to the evil that is, you know, the walking dude, the Man in Black. And so, I mean, I'm very hopeful that she will bring it, and that she will just have just renewed gravitas and just skill, and take the role very seriously. But yeah, once again, she's been doing so much talk show work now, but this is what I would probably consider very on the nose casting to a degree. Moving on to the fact that Glenn Bateman is going to be much younger in this than I always envisioned. Greg Kinnear playing him. You know, Greg Kinnear is an extremely talented actor, and even when he had his little post-Oscar, post-as-good-as-it-gets bit where they had him trying to do, like, romantic comedies and things like that, I mean, I've always appreciated the dramatic aspect, and I guess he is so much older now, and he can, I mean, Glenn Bateman from the original television series, man, I that, once again, different turn of the wheel. You have to separate it, Fuego, and this is something that Cecil and I even talked about recently, where you just have to be accepting of different takes of characters. And you know, I'm going in with an open mind about Greg Kinnear, and the fact that, yeah, I mean, since As Good as It Gets, like 25 years have gone by, you know, since that James L. Brooks film. You know, by the time this actually comes out, because it's scheduled to start filming here this month in September, and it's going to film all the way through March of 2020 with a presumed fall release for the CBS All Access schedule. And so, I mean, I'm okay with the casting. They could have gone, this is one of the bigger names though, you know, because a lot of the other names that I'm about to start segueing into, they are nowhere near as reputable. I mean, Harold Lauder, everybody is going to see Patrick. They're all going to see Hawkstar, you know, for the original 2017 film. I thought he was decent enough in that role, even if, and to name the actor properly, Owen Teague, but they're still not quite going the route of Harold as described in the book or as represented in the comic book. Unless he's going to put on a bunch of weight and they're going to make him all pimply and stuff like that, it does make me wonder if he's gonna chub out just to the slightest degree, and then they will have him thin out over the course. I mean, that would be kind of lame if they, you know, had him like maybe with weird undergarment bodysuit kind of thing. They have him start out as overweight and then slowly segue into it. I mean, he had adequate menace in his couple scenes in chapter 2, but you know, then again, he's dead and he had like all his skull teeth and stuff going down. But yeah, he was definitely legit menacing, and you know, he's got this tall, storky kind of you know, praying mantis you know, body structure and whatnot. So I'm curious what he's going to bring to the role. I feel like he has the acting chops, but once again, too much of a pretty boy, too much, I mean, too far away from the transformative aspect that we are supposed to see go through Harold. And yeah, they're definitely going significantly younger with the predominance of the casting here, and that actually segues into Odessa Young, and she is a lot younger than James Marsden. Like, we were talking a lot younger. The only thing that I have seen her in, and she's playing Franny Goldsmith, you know, Franny Fanny. I've only seen her in Assassination Nation, and she's a pretty young little thing, and she had, I mean, decent enough, you know, just range and whatnot in the very tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic craziness playing Lily in the Assassination Nation film. But I wasn't particularly fond of that film. But her acting wasn't the problem in it. So, but it just shows with going with an actress of that age that, yeah, they're really trying to go more like actual age specific, I suppose. You know, because Franny is supposed to be a college student, and I gotta say that, yeah, Molly Ringwald definitely did not fit the whole college student mold. But then again, that's because she's probably late 20s, early 30s, you know, when she was playing that role of, you know, this pregnant, you know, woman who basically loses everything except for the child that's still growing in her tum-tum from the asshole that she was dating, you know, when the whole Captain Trips hits and stuff. So that's, once again, casting that I can't say I'm over the moon ecstatic about, but it shows just the attention to the proper age of these characters that we are actually going to see. And I guess in that regard, yeah, the casting of Owen Teague as Harold really does make a little bit more sense. So, because yeah, both Odessa and Owen are early 20s actors, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another thing. Now, the next bit of casting is the one that you know, there was apparently a big bit of controversy about, and that was the casting of Henry Zaga as Nick Andros. And I guess they wanted various circles in Hollywood to have an actual deaf actor cast as Nick Andros because he is deaf. And one hearing impaired actor in particular had an exchange back and forth with Josh Boone that, you know, they screen captured and turned into this whole big controversy. And it was essentially saying, why can't, you know, we have a hearing impaired actor, so on and so forth. Previously played by Rob Lowe, so I guess that was definitely some more of the star power in the original 94 miniseries. But I'm going to side with Josh Boone on this, because Josh Boone contended in his defense of the casting that, and that is another thing, is that actors are, at least in my estimation, you're supposed to be a chameleon, you're supposed to be adaptable, and, you know, I feel like there is something impressive to how long have, like, actual gay men and women played straight characters, and vice versa? And, you know, I know it's a whole big debate, and this is going to be a controversial opinion, but this is just my opinion. I feel like there is something to an actor playing someone, you know, whether it's, you know, gender, whether it's sexual preference, all of that stuff. I think that there is something to just not being yourself, you know, and I don't feel like you have to have that sort of, you know, accurate connection, because that's the most impressive thing about actors, is the fact that they're supposed to be able to be adaptable and convincing in portraying a role that is not them, whether it's, you know, somebody who has a different, you know, sexual preference, or whether it's, just some nasty piece of crap who is playing this villainous whatever type of person, and in real life, you know, they're one of the most warm, sweet, and heartfelt people that you would ever encounter, you know, behind the scenes in a working environment, whatever. That's what is so impressive about the best of actors. And so with this, I mean, Boone basically said, he's like, there are scenes in both the book and the original miniseries, and yes, we all know this who are familiar with the source material, that Nick Andrus has dream sequences, and in these dream sequences, he can talk, you know, and that's where I feel like, unless it was a very, very adept, you know, there's lots of deaf actors that, you know, can speak and speak very well. So perhaps there is an essence of argument to that, but I will at least give Boone the pass, despite the controversy, for making this sort of decision. I guess this actor in particular, he's in the New Mutants film that Josh Boone had already done, so they have that connective tissue, and that probably shows why he was more inclined to cast him. Who knows if we will ever see that movie at this point. It breaks my heart. It's currently scheduled for a release sometime in 2020, but we don't know if it's going to get dumped on Hulu, or if it's even going to see a theatrical release, or if it's even going to see a release at all. But fingers firmly crossed, because I do really like the cast in that film, and it's a story that I really wanted to see told. But more people probably know him from his time on Teen Wolf, the the MTV reimagining of it, than anything else. And so, I mean, that's casting where I don't really have much to say, but I mean, compared to the stardom of Rob Lowe, yeah, it's definitely a lot more meager. And that's another actor that I have to mention, is this Brad William Henke, I want to say. He's our new Tom Cullen. Previous guy who was on Coach, M-O-O-N, that spells Coach. He's forever, and this is once again trying so hard to separate the original actor who portrayed so wonderfully, and honestly, a lot of the illustrations in the Stand mini, just like limited run comic book, because it had what, like 5 or 6 different sections of issues. It came out to, like, oh boy, I want to say maybe 30 issues or somewhere around there, close to it at least, somewhere a little below or above. There is a lot of character representations that were very indicative of the prior visual, just, I guess, you know, example that we had from the television series. And so, I don't know, dude from Coach is most definitely the guy who I will always think of when I think of Mr. Cullen, and, you know, his just sweet, you know, simplicity, I suppose. But, yeah, Brad William Henke, everybody knows him from Orange is the New Black. I don't watch Orange is the New Black, so I can't really comment about, yeah, I mean, he has a seemingly, and he plays a guard on there if I'm not mistaken, so, I mean, a physically imposing presence, which is what Tom is supposed to be. He's supposed to be like this big brute of a dude that is just so sweet and just soothing, and, you know, just a very kind-hearted guy, despite his lack of smarts. You know, he really, despite his, you know, fearsome physical presence, is just, you know, about as kind as can be. And I guess at least in the appearance department, he fits the bill. But that's another one where, much like, you know, this Henry Zaga actor who was going to be playing Nick Andrus, and, you know, both of them are going to be spending tons of time on screen in this 10-episode limited series. So I'm curious about that. Very curious about that. Now we come to the two pieces of casting that for me are the most intriguing and yet the most controversial. I've gone on record various times to say that Larry Underwood is my absolute favorite Stephen King character of all time. Wireman from Do McKee, very, very close second. Man after my own heart in both regards. They're obviously taking a very drastic detour with Larry by going with an African-American British actor. His name is Giovanna Depo. I saw him in Overlord and I thought he was terrific. I haven't watched The Leftovers though. I know he's supposed to be in the new Jack Ryan limited series, the second season of it, I believe, with Homeboy from The Office and from The Quiet Place. And then Sorry for Your Loss is another thing that he was on. And then he was also in the Denzel Washington Viola Davis film Fences. Not supremely familiar with him beyond what I've seen in Overlord. But this is a drastic change for the Larry Underwood character for the sheer fact that he is, he's a blues musician in the original book and in the television series, but like his whole thing is how, you know, he's a white dude playing blues music, playing the black man's music. And I mean, what would rock and so many other genres that I love be if not for white men ripping off the blues? And yet that was the funny thing about just the Larry character, you know, and his very inappropriate comment about that brown sound's getting around town, Mom, and, you know, so on and so forth. And yet that was a shtick of the character, and I'm assuming this racial change is very specifically because of the fact that they didn't want that topic to be a thing in this. And so this is where I'm not going to denounce this casting, but I'm going to say very similar to what happened with Idris and just the way the character is described in the source material for Roland Deschain in comparison. That's where I have so much respect for, you know, changes to a regard, and this is where I have to really dance around an issue, but I'm approaching with an open mind, and yet I'm kind of curious about just how much, like, I mean, Larry's a character that I look up to a degree and then relate to so much because of the fact that he's flawed and, you know, he tries so damn desperately to do the right thing and just, you know, fails miserably constantly, you know, but, you know, he's willing to sacrifice. He is, you know, he has a heart of gold. He is very talented but very troubled. And you know what? At the end of the day, none of those things have anything to do with the color of your skin. So for that reason, I'm trying to approach with an open mind, despite the fact that, you know, I'm just so used to how the character is framed in the book and how that does kind of in a lot of ways tie in with his race, you know. But I'm going to, you know, at least approach with a little more optimism than our Randalll Flagg casting. Alexander Skarsgård. So we basically have the oldest Skarsgård brother now taking up the mantle of arguably the second most iconic Stephen King villain. Now I'm sure there's other people who would say no, it's Jack Torrance, no, it's you know, Annie Wilkes. I mean, there's different people who are much more iconic than Randalll Flagg. But for Tower junkies like myself, for the most dedicated of constant readers, those who have just trudged through so many different works over the decades, Randalll Flagg is easily as iconic as Pennywise, if not more so, because he has appeared in more works. And for that reason, while initially I was pretty stoked about the Skarsgård, you know, casting, I was like, man, the brothers are going to be holding it down, you know, those Swedes getting it done, and so on and so forth. But the more I've thought about it, the more I'm not sure I like this casting. I am not going to take anything away from Skarsgård as an actor. I know he's been, like, received so much acclaim, whether it was, you know, True Blood, more recently Pretty Little Lies, I believe, is a show that he was a part of, and, you know, various other things. He's very handsome and very talented as an actor. but I feel like he's too handsome to be Randall Flagg. I don't necessarily know if he has enough grit and enough darkness. I'll always think of him as Eric from True Blood, and I thought he was great on True Blood, but I'm just not sold on this casting. I think he's too pretty. He's not rugged enough. And while, you know, he had an element of menace, there was also an element of, like, softness as well to him. And so, yeah, I saw a lot of peeps raving about this casting. And initially, because this was the biggest news of the week, was everybody was speculating who the hell was going to play Randall Flagg, you know? And for me, I would have probably been more cool with, like, I mean, envisioning him in a mullet could have been interesting, but I would have liked maybe a Michael Shannon, you know, and just, I don't know, somebody with more of like a creepy craziness to them as opposed to this like very handsome, alluring nature that we will get now. We're not sure, you know, if they're going to dye his hair, if they're going to make him look a little bit more like edgy and dirtier or whatever, but this is really, really flippin' studly for Randall Flagg, at least in my personal opinion. But once again, just like with racial change to Larry, just like with the younger ages of so many characters, it's a different turn of the wheel, you know, and nothing can take the book away from us, obviously. But I have reservations. I honestly have reservations majorly about this series in general. I'm happy that it's 10 episodes. I think it's cool that King has penned the 10th episode himself, which is going to be kind of a coda, you know, almost like what happened with Franny and Stu after they went back east and left, you know, the free zone and stuff. So I'm really curious what this idea that King says has been bouncing around in his head for like 20-something years, what it's going to entail. Will they show the circle, closing back or opening or whatever the hell it is, because, you know, the circle opens and the circle closes in the uncut version of it, and Flagg pops back up at the very end on some deserted island. Is Skarsgård going to show up on a deserted island after being presumably killed? I'm still really curious who's going to play Lloyd. I'm still really curious who the hell is going to play Trash Can Man. I thought about waiting until all of that casting was complete and done to do this video, but I think the Skarsgård announcement was big enough where it just couldn't wait. And even though, you know, yes, I wanted all the Institute stuff this week to be of the primary focus, that's just, I mean, True Blood was a beloved show by a lot of people. I loved the first few seasons of it. I want to say till like about 3 or 4. But yeah, I ended up just, falling off the train when they were veering further from Charlene Harris, I believe the author's name is, original material, and just kind of running with it and doing it a little bit more themselves. I mean, you know, the death of Lafayette, in the book, and then him sticking around in it, but he was such an important character. I don't know. Sookie, yeah, that's a show that I need to revisit at some particular point, but I didn't even end up finishing it, you know. I don't think I watched to season 6 or 7. Yeah, I was just losing interest. I felt like the writing was losing quality, and so on and so forth. But yeah, Skarsgård will always be known, in my estimation, for that. It's going to be interesting trying to separate all of these different things. So I don't know. There was certain bits here that I am very just staunchly enthusiastic about, and then there's other bits where I'm just like, I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit, but I'm very much seeing where they're going. I'm happy that we have just less constraints about the extremity of the material on the CBS All Access platform. I know that they can really push towards like around an R rating as far as, just the type of more adult content, as far as swearing and violence and sex and stuff like that. But I mean, The Stand isn't really a very sex-heavy book. It does get fairly violent at times, but I still felt like they tackled it pretty well, with the exception of a few scenes in particular, most notably a couple that were added into the uncut version, with the kid and with all of the women who were being held captive, like Dana and stuff. So I don't know. I'm guessing that's the type of stuff that's going to be re-injected into the storytelling. 10 episodes is plenty of time to try to do this, and although the previous one was a 4-night event series, so I mean they are adding another 4 hours, I guess. So yeah, that's a significant chunk of time. For my money, though, the comic book that Marvel did a few years ago, well, actually about a decade ago now that I think about it, is still the quintessential adaptation of the source material, but I'm very curious what this new cast, Josh Boone being a collaborator and a confidant of King since he was a kid, you know, what is going to be brought to the proceedings. But you do have star power here, too, you know, between Marsden and Kinnear and Whoopi and Amber Heard to a degree. You know, everybody's all hot on her since Aquaman, even though I thought she was like, her chemistry with Momoa was one of the worst things in that film. And then there's a lot of like just smaller bit players from, you know, streaming and television and stuff like that. So I'm very curious where this is all going to go and where it's all going to end up when we get to see this presumably next fall in 2020. So I've been Jaime Fuego. I extend a grande gracias for anybody who is tuned in just to hear my thoughts about the, you know, these casting announcements and the entirety of the just intriguing nature of all of them. Am I totally full of it? Am I wrong? Am I mistaken? Do you think this cast is kick-ass? Do you like the original miniseries? Do you know, actually think it holds up as well as I do? What's your thoughts about some of the casting in comparison? Do you think it's better? They're going more age appropriate? Let me know in those comments below. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. It is greatly appreciated for anybody who jumps onto my own personal YouTube in Fuegotainment. That's where lots of different coverage over the course of this last year, most notably some Star Wars stuff leading up to the release of The Rise of Skywalker in December, comic stuff, some book stuff, and, you know, usually at least a new review every week or so. It's kind of the dead zone here in September of intriguing releases, and so for that reason, yeah, I think it's been about a week or so since something has gone up, and, you know, some of my favorites that I've reviewed this year, Good Boys, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a small indie called Wild Rose. These are some of my faves, and you can find reviews of all of those on my personal YouTube channel. But obviously, you're here for spectacular coverage. Am I right? Yes, of course you are. And so that's why, yes, if you haven't liked, shared, and subscribed here on the Horror Show channel, it is greatly appreciated if you take the plunge and show some support. We do at least one episode a day. Sometimes in specific instances, we will do a second, and I think that is going to be the case for my review of The Institute, which I finished, and ended up with different feelings at the end of it than when I began, so that is at least slightly telling, but you're going to have to check out the review just to get the full context of all of that. And yes, lastly, every Monday evening at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, I am a part of a program called Show Business on the Willis Screedia YouTube channel. Myself, Lindsay Memze, and CP, we get together and we talk about the previous weekend's box office numbers, both domestically and internationally. We discuss a little bit of the biggest news from the previous week, and then we look ahead to the following weekend and we make our predictions. So if you have interest in checking me out on any of those sectors of film and entertainment discussion, it is supremely appreciated. And I guess I'll hit you with my typical send-off, y'all, and say until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike. But I am hopeful that we get to share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King. That's right, you haven't got to it yet. Oh boy, The Institute. Yes, it's pretty cute.